Hello, BookTube, and welcome to a brand new BookTube event, Rocket Summer, created by the indefatigable Michael K. Vaughan, who has a knack for creating great BookTube events. This is going on throughout the month of July, and it is celebrating science fiction, the formative, the vintage, and the golden age of science fiction. Uh, Mike has a talent for creating these kinds of events. He also, as you can tell if you clicked on this video, has a talent for making thumbnails. I didn't really ever think of my little dog Frida as the Romulan commander from Star Trek, but their personalities are basically the same, so I should have. But Rocket Summer celebrates science fiction here in high summer in the Northern Hemisphere, which I don't think is a complete coincidence. It would feel a little weird to have a science fiction event like this in the middle of winter. I don't quite know why it is, but I know so many readers, fans of science fiction who associate it with the hot months of summer. I certainly do. With reading, in the park with where I'm surrounded by beagles who look dead. They're on their backs with all their feet stuck up in the air like that, just absorbing the coolness of the grass, or on the floor in the living room, again surrounded by beagles, just reading endlessly, endless hours of hot summer science fiction. I don't know if that was on Mike's mind, but it certainly makes this feel more natural as an event for me. And I am one of the co-hosts, and once again, you are going to see immediately that I am a bad co-host. I am a very bad co-host. Because Rocket Summer has a structure. It wants to walk you through the formative decades of science fiction. So the first week, this week of Rocket Summer, is the very earliest decades of science fiction. So you start with the prototypical people. H.G. Wells, my own favorite Jules Verne, Mike's favorite Edgar Rice Burroughs. You start with people who blazed a trail of what science fiction even is going to be. You could also here include Mary Shelley for Frankenstein and The Last Man. And then the second week, you move on to the war years, the Depression years and the war years. You move on to there, to a different kind of science fiction. And then you move on to the 50s, when all of a sudden science fiction ideas did not seem so outlandish anymore. It was in the 50s that we started talking about satellites. It was in the 50s that we started talking about actually getting data on our nearest celestial neighbors, the planets, the rocky inner planets of our solar system, of which Earth is one. And then we move on to the 60s, which was an absolute atomic explosion of creativity in the science fiction world. Suddenly, science, popularly conceived, was everywhere. I know that's going to seem weird to those of you who were born in the 21st century. You're going to think there was no science back in the 1960s. It was stone knives and bearskins. But that's not true. Suddenly, science felt like it was everywhere. Suddenly, oh God, the list is endless. Not only numbers of satellites, but hard information about the solar system. And science fiction all over plastic media. TV, movies, tons of books, tons of science fiction novels. Suddenly, in the 1960s, it took off, and that is where Rocket Summer achieves liftoff and ends. The cutoff date for Rocket Summer is 1970. So if you want to read a science fiction novel from 1971 for Rocket Summer, you can't do it. You're forbidden. Because if there's one thing Michael K. Vaughan is known for, it's his strict adherence to the rules on book. He's a hard ass. And I know this. I knew this going in. I have a whole bunch of reading ideas for the formative years of science fiction, including a big fat anthology of Jules Verne that I just recently got. I got it a month ago. I knew all of that, and yet, am I doing it for my first installment of Rocket Summer? No, I am not. I was building my reading yesterday. For those of you who are new to this channel, I build the books on my nightstand all day long. I'm reading all day long as well, and working. I do work. I know that I have a reputation of being a parasite who sits on his fainting couch all day long, but there is work that gets done here. And also I dote on my little dog and walk my little dog and pamper with my little dog and whatnot, do emails and tons of other things, including a freelance job that just doesn't want to die. It keeps fluttering back to life. I honestly think that that this week it will flutter fully back to life, and who knows how much of my time it will pull down. In between all of those things during the day, I am also reading. My life is, except for Frida, except for my little dog, my life is entirely consumed with books. But that whole time, I'm also tossing things onto a nightstand pile for my nighttime reading. Because I get an extra day while you are a drooling blob of protoplasm on your pillow. I get an extra chunk of time to read, and I take advantage of it. But at night, after midnight, I don't do anything but read. I don't do any of the rest of it. I don't pamper the little dog because she's sound asleep. I don't deal with emails. I ignore them. I don't deal with text messages or Voxer messages. I ignore them. I don't deal with the outside world. Don't look at the news or anything like that. Don't deal with freelance work. That's 9 to 5. I don't do anything like that at midnight. After midnight, I just read. And so I assemble my night's reading during the day. And for BookTube events, I toss books on that pile for any pertinent BookTube event. In this weird thing that we're all doing, that I predict 10 years from now, when we all look back on this, when we don't do it anymore, when maybe the platform doesn't exist anymore, when whatever the factors are that stops it, we're all going to look back and smile, ear-to-ear smile, and say, oh yeah, that was when I was booktubing. Because it was so much fun. Because this weird thing that we're doing connected us with a whole bunch of people and made this private, weird hobby of ours as communal and fun and friendly as we have ever known it to be. It's an amazing thing. Well, I don't know how long it will last, but it's an amazing thing. And I love it wholeheartedly, so I throw myself into BookTube events. And I picked a book for last night for Rocket Summer, and it defies the rules of Rocket Summer. I'm a bad host right out of the gate. For Rocket Summer last night, I picked a book from 1970. I picked Ringworld by Larry Niven, his 1970 novel that won the Hugo and Nebula Awards. I'm sure it won a bunch of other awards as well. It was immediately announced itself as a major science fiction work. And I remember that. I remember when this first came out, word of mouth started to spread everywhere. The industry magazines that I was reading started to talk about it as a major thing. There was a little bit of Doppler shift for the reception of a book in the ghetto genres back then. A major Jonathan Franzen novel. He wasn't writing then, but his exact clones were. One of those things would hoover into view in the New York Times, and all of a sudden the book chat world would talk about it as a masterpiece right away. But with the ghetto genres, mystery, science fiction, romance, of course, not so much. With that, a book's position as a classic in the genre sometimes took a couple of years of word of mouth and people looking back over their reading year and realizing, wow, that was head and shoulders better than anything else I read that year. Sometimes not. Sometimes not. Frank Herbert's Dune, I think it was pretty obvious right from the beginning when it appeared that it was massive, that it was major. A lot of that kind of talk attended this book when it first appeared, and I didn't get it. I read the book, and I liked it. I thought it was very enjoyable, but I didn't get the masterpiece thing, even though I succumbed to it. When freelance editors asked me to put together lists of great science fiction novels from back in ye olden times, I would include this book, even though I wasn't 100% convinced I would include it. And certainly nothing that Larry Niven did after. He wrote 1 million sequels to this thing and spin-offs to this thing, and virtually none of them are any good. And I that didn't help any. But I recently saw someone on Instagram just putting together his day's outfit. His day's outfit was a whole lot more attractive than my day's outfit, and at the end of the video, he just nonchalantly said, well, there's my shoulder bag, pop in my sunglasses, my headphones, my ear pods or whatnot, and a book. And it wasn't an e-reader. He popped in a print and paper mass market book, and it was Ringworld by Larry Niven. Caught me by surprise. That's, to put it mildly, it caught me by surprise. I was not expecting that at all from someone in his early 20s. Naturally, it filled me with 1 million questions. Predictable kinds of questions. It's predictable kinds of questions. I'm sure that immediately my concentration on that video was taken away from the aesthetic appeal and was filled instead with a million bookish questions. Where did you find this copy? What on earth made you even realize that a bestseller, that a science fiction classic from 1970, when your parents were children, what made you even realize that it was out there? What on earth drew you to this book? If you are an attractive young man between the ages of 18 and 30, and you want to disappear completely from Steve's radar as an aesthetic object and instead immediately become a person who's going to get bombarded with personal questions, that's the way you do it. Just in case you ever want to know, that's the way you do it. That's the way your physical attractiveness suddenly vanishes. Never to return. Never to return. I will never notice it in the same way after that. I will offhandedly mention, oh, sure, person X, Y, or Z is good looking, but I won't care. Instead, all I'll be thinking about is the books. Something wrong with me. or maybe there's something right with me. But anyway, I saw that, and that was all the nudge that I needed. So if the pretty people are doing it, then a 28-year-old super hottie is going to do it as well. So I grabbed a copy of this book and reread it last night in complete violation of Rocket Summer rules and regulations. I should be starting with Jules Verne. I'm long overdue to reread a lot of Jules Verne. I love him. He's my favorite of the foundational science fiction authors. I'm long overdue, and I didn't. I didn't even think about it. Instead, I reread Ringworld. We're not doing official book reviews for BookTube events, but for those of you who don't know what this book is, it is a science fiction novel set in centuries in the future, in which a 200-year-old man is bored. And he is approached by an alien species. At the point in this novel, Earth knows of a whole bunch of alien species. Their natures and customs and appearances are well known. Earth is temporarily at peace with all of them, although that's sometimes a little tense. And he is approached by a member of one of these alien species, not humanoid at all, who has a proposition. This member of an alien species, his species is terrified. They specialize in being terrified. An item that in case that sounds familiar to you, the showrunners for Star Trek Discovery, rightly known by its fans or its detractors as STD, ripped off for one of the main aliens in that show. The aliens in this book specialize in being terrified. They have developed, evolutionarily, a hyper-awareness of cowardice, of terror in the face of potential threats. And they have detected a massive chain reaction of explosions at the core of the Milky Way galaxy, which present an existential threat to everyone in the galaxy, but that threat is 20,000 years in the future. The galaxy's pretty big. It's going to take a long time for that wave front of lethal radiation to reach their worlds. They still want to flee. They still want to protect themselves somehow from that eventuality. And in their scouting around, they have discovered an incredible structure, an artificial ring around a star, around a G-sequence Earth-type star. They have discovered an artificial ring that is habitable. The ring is spinning. It's not actually, a couple of times characters in here say that it's orbiting the star. It's not orbiting the star if it's not moving. It's spinning on its own, but it's not covering any space. So it's not quite this. Well, anyway, oh God, I'll get to the technical nitpicking. This thing it's rotating as it encircles this star, and that is providing gravity. That is creating a gravitational field that holds an oxygen on the inside of the ring all the way around it. So millions and millions and millions and millions of thousands of miles of habitable landscape with an atmosphere. And it is inhabited. This ring world is, it turns out, inhabited. But this alien approaches this bored 200-year-old man and says, I want your help exploring this thing. I want to put together a small team, to go to this ring and explore it. And the old man, Louis Wu, says, well, if it's where you say it is, what difference does it make to pick a team? None of us will live long enough to get there. And the alien proposes that he has a ship that can get there in 4/5 of a second. That's new technology. That does not exist. He's willing to share that technology and a prototype in exchange for the help of the people involved. So they put together a team. There's the old man, the old scientist. There's a feloid giant cat type alien, a Kazin warrior, giant furry, temperamental warrior-like, and there's also a token beautiful woman who is. There's a certain amount of baked-in sexism here. Not much, but a certain amount. She is very lucky. She may have an evolutionary talent for luck. And you'll never guess what she wants her luck to do, ultimately. Find her a man. The other characters get to be disinterested. She doesn't. Women in old science fiction never get to be disinterested. They never get to have any desires greater than procreating with men. But she's still a fleshed out character. I knew what I was getting into when I reread this, and boy, oh boy, did I love it. I loved it a lot more than I did the first time that I read it. I think I picked around its edges once in the late 1980s and just wasn't in the mood. And the thing that put me off wanting to give it a full, aware reread is one of its foremost elements. And that is the science wonkery of Larry Niven himself. Because he doesn't glancingly describe this Ringworld the way I just did. He goes into enormous detail about how it would work and how it has to be poised at what gravitational, what AU distance from the star involved, and how will the surface work, and what's it made of, and what are the attendant orbital platforms that protect it from what and in what way. And so, once our characters get here, well, then it's just a planetary adventure, exactly along the lines of Jack Vance or Edgar Rice Burroughs. Then they're just encountering one damn thing after another. And Niven is really good at that, but let's not elevate it any more than it is, right? I mean, when Paul Atreides and his mother, Jessica, are cast into the desert in the novel Dune, they have adventures, but the adventures have a point. There's a plot that is arcing over their adventures. It's not really here. The alien who is paying for this whole thing wants to understand what this ring world is, but tensions between the group erode that particular motive quite a bit. And after they get here, it's just one adventure after another, and then the question is, can they get out? Can they escape this ring world? Because it's vast. Keep in mind, it's hugely bigger than Earth. It's not the same shape, but the habitable area where people can live. This cover shows a vague idea. You wouldn't have a. The idea is that one side of this ring world, the sky side, I guess you could call it, would not need to be enclosed. You wouldn't need to enclose it. The atmosphere would be held by the gravity, same as the people. So you wouldn't need to put a roof over it. The air won't escape into space. The gravity will hold it in place, much as it does on Earth, where you don't need a cover over the Earth to keep the atmosphere here. See, I'm once again descending into wonkery because there's no way to avoid it here. This is not just one damn thing after another. This is not like, for instance, the Majapur Chronicles. This is also Larry Niven indulging himself in something that I admit he does really well, which is to come up with a science idea and then work out what it would be like and how people would experience it if they didn't know that it was a science idea. What would the daily life be like on this ring? What would sunrise be like? Would there be a sunrise? And if there weren't a sunrise and hadn't been forever, then what would societies be like that had never had a sunrise? That had no concept of up or down, no concept of, for instance, digging. Extensive digging. You, of course, can't mine on this thing. That mining would be gone. It would be a foreign concept. At one point, at the climactic point, the characters find a giant mound And the main character hypothesizes that it's, of course, there's no tectonic activity on Ringworld. He hypothesizes that what it is that a meteor struck the underside of the ring and punched just that far forward and made the mound on its own. At several points in this book, dealing to do with water, with gravity, ultraviolet radiation, at several points, Larry Niven will all but stop the narrative in order to just geek out on how that would work. How would that work? Not only how would it work in terms of physics, but how would it be perceived to work? How would people perceive it to work who did not know the physics? And you just have to be along for that ride. You just have to be up for that. I guess the first time that I read this, I was not at all. I was saying, you're Larry Niven. If you want to write a scientific paper on this, there are plenty of science fiction venues that will take it. But I shouldn't have to encounter it in your book. This is a novel. You're supposed to be telling a story, developing characters, entertaining me. And I think the second time in the late 80s, I remember at least one time where I went back to this and sniffed around its edges. And I think the thing that put me off is that I was thinking, no, I don't. I know what this is, and I don't want that. It's inept. I read it again last night. It's not inept. It's terrific, and it's larger than life adventure. It deserved its award. It's also really, really well executed. Those factual science geek exposition dumps are still here. Definitely, they're still here. You can see they have a magnetic appeal. Even talking about the book, much less reading it, magnetically pulls you towards trying to figure out how it works. I'm not really supposed to wonder that. That's, if you have worked out the exact way this thing works, fine. I guess an appendix, maybe. But anyway, I loved it. My Rocket Summer, I'm breaking the rules here. I started at the end. I'm starting with 1970, but I loved it. My Rocket Summer is off to a great start. This Ringworld has gone so far up in my estimation as a heck of a book to recommend. I would never have recommended this to somebody saying, I want to read some science fiction. I would have thought, oh, well, you don't want to recommend so-called hard science fiction to them. Definitely not. That's one of the things, one of the bad impressions, the bad inaccurate impressions that people have of science fiction just in general, is that it's all ray guns and slide rules. No. So I would never do that. Now, that's completely changed. This would be a great recommendation for somebody who wants to get into science fiction. Just fantastic. You're in the hands of a great storyteller here. I missed that, or I was resistant to it. So I'm very glad that I went back to this, even though it makes me a really bad host. So maybe for tonight's reading, I will go to a formative decade of science fiction. I certainly hope so. I don't want Michael K. Vaughan to kick me off the event. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We've got a whole month of books, so I will wrap this up for now, and I will reconnect tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.